I was at the lake the other day and I passed by a guy on the bank and I asked him, like I always do, I said, "You catching them all?" And he just laughed at me. He said, "There's fish in here. They keep following my bait. I just can't get them to bite." And honestly, that's one of the most frustrating things in fishing, because the fish is there, it sees the bait, it's interested, but it won't commit. And here's what took me a long time to figure out. A fish following your lure is actually telling you something. And once you learn how to read it, those follows start turning into a lot more bites. In this video, we're going to break down the 7 reasons fish follow without biting. And one of them is probably costing you more fish than everything else on this list combined. Number 1, you're moving too fast. When a fish follows the lure, it's already committing energy to checking it out. It noticed the bait. It's tracking the bait. It moved toward it. It's interested. But predators, they key in on vulnerable prey because vulnerable prey is easy to catch. Real bait fish, they dart, they pause, sometimes they wobble if they're injured. That pause tells the fish, now I can catch it. If your bait never slows down, the fish never gets that trigger. This is why jerkbait pauses are so deadly. You twitch it and then you let it hang there like something dying. Next time you get a follow, don't change the lure. Slow it down. Kill the bait for a second or two. Let it look weak. A lot of bites happen right after that lure stops looking healthy. Number 2, your retrieve angle is wrong. And I've talked about this in other videos. Most anglers cast straight out every time, just straight out at 12 o'clock. They might like hit 11, 12, 1, but they're kind of casting all straight out. But bass, they set up to ambush prey moving through and along cover, not something flying straight across open water towards shore. I mean, it happens, right? But it's not common. Think about this. Bait fish don't often swim straight across open water. Where do you see bait fish? You see them moving along the edge of the bank, along the cover. So fan your casts out instead. 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Work that clock. Fish parallel to cover whenever you can. Now the bait is staying in that strike zone way longer and the fish has more time to commit. Before, the fish was basically telling you, I'm interested, you just pulled it away too soon. Change your angle before you change your lure. Number 3, you're ending the retrieve too early. The fish follows all the way to the bank, you see it behind the lure, and right when the fish is closest, most likely to commit, you lift the bait out of the water. Then the fish disappears. So musky anglers figured this out years ago with this figure 8 move that they do. They don't end the retrieve early because they know fish often bite at the very last second. And the first time I saw this, I was up in the Midwest visiting a friend. We were smallmouth fishing and I saw him do this figure 8 thing. And then boom, he had a fish on it. And I'm like, what was that? And he said, I had a pike following. And he was like, 9 times out of 10, if you just do this figure 8, change that direction, that will trigger a muskie or a pike to bite. And sure enough, it did. And so I've translated this into bass fishing and I've caught a lot of fish right close to the bank. Instead of pulling that lure out, if I see a fish following, I'll kind of stop it or I'll push it forward, pull it back, slide it along further to the right, make it kind of change angle. That pause, that twitch, that sweeping it sideways gives the fish one final trigger. And I've caught a lot of fish like that. Sometimes that bite doesn't happen during the retrieve. It happens during that last change. Reason number 4, something broke the illusion, and sometimes this one's tough to overcome, right? Sometimes the retrieve is perfect and the fish flares off for no obvious reason. Usually something broke the illusion for a split second. Maybe it was a line flash, your shadow over the water, an awkward roll on the pause, rod movement transmitting unnatural vibration to the bait. Especially in clear water, fish are evaluating everything the entire time they follow. The second something feels wrong or off, they lose confidence. This is where you might move into something like a finesse type presentation, because the finesse presentation, get so many bites in clear water because there's less hardware, less flash, less for fish to reject. The other thing you can try is trying to get longer casts out. The further the bait is from you, the less fish can detect what you were doing on the bank there. Reason number 5, your bait is too aggressive. A fish following your lure doesn't always mean that it looks delicious. Sometimes it means, what is that? It's curiosity, not feeding. Sometimes cold fronts, these bright bluebird skies, heavy pressured water, fish will go neutral, still moving, still looking, just not committed to eating. When that happens, big aggressive presentations work against you. I saw another guy and he had this giant glide bait and he was throwing it out there and he was like, check this out. He's like, every other cast I can get a fish to follow this thing. And he was reeling it in. Sure enough, there's a fish following it in. And he's like, they just won't take it. And I asked him, I said, do you have something smaller that's similar? And he said, yeah. I said, well, put it on. And he put it on. He dropped down from that big glide bait to something kind of like this, like a swim bait. And boom, he had a fish. Just like that, just downsizing. The downsize, it's less vibration, less flash, less commotion. In this instance, you're stopping trying to force a reaction. You're trying to look easy, like something barely alive. And sometimes that's all it takes. So in these situations, you might drop down to something like a wacky rig or a plain weightless worm or something finesse. Or like that guy, just downsize because he knew the fish was interested in what he was throwing, but it was just too big. And once I told him to downsize, boom, he was catching them. Okay, before we get into the next one, if you're finding this helpful, hit subscribe. Every week I break down stuff that actually matters on the water. The one I mentioned at the very top of this video, the single reason responsible for more follows without bites than probably everything else on the list combined, that's number 6. You're attracting fish, you're not triggering it. So most anglers, they assume if the fish followed, it wanted to eat. But that's not necessarily true. A follow is not always a feeding response. Bass and other predatory fish will inspect, they'll escort, they'll pressure something in their territory without ever planning to eat it. The fish might be curious, it might be territorial, it might just be reacting to movement. That's why you can't just attract the fish. Sometimes you have to trigger that commitment. And the best triggers are sudden, unpredictable changes. A pause, a direction change, a deflection off cover. Think about a square bill ticking off a rock, off a log, a lipless crankbait ripped free from grass, a chatterbait just going across the water like that, a jerkbait that suddenly stops and just hangs there. Those baits, they'll trigger a fish. And that fish stops analyzing, instinct kicks in, and it just reacts. That's the difference between a follow and a bite. So number 7, you're not in the fish's strike zone. This one's interesting. Here's what most beginners don't think about. Most anglers think about where the fish is horizontally out in the water, where it's located horizontally. Cast to the dock, cast to the grass edge, cast to the rock. But they never think about where the fish is vertically in the water column. And that matters just as much. A bass sitting tight to the bottom in 8 feet of water might follow a swim bait cruising up 4 feet out of curiosity. Maybe it's a territorial instinct, but it's never going to fully commit to something that's that far out of its zone. It's like dangling food just out of reach. The fish notices, it moves toward it, but the effort to actually eat it never quite adds up. That's why the same lure fished at different depths can completely change the result. A swim bait on a heavier jig head drops faster, runs deeper, stays in the bottom zone longer. A jig dragged along the bottom instead of hopped through the water column. A drop shot suspended right at the depth where the fish are instead of above them. If you're getting consistent follows with no bites and you've already slowed down, you've changed your angle, you've tried to trigger the fish, ask yourself one more question. Am I actually at the fish's level? Because the fish that follows without biting isn't always saying the bait looks wrong. Sometimes it's saying, come down here. Next time you're out and the fish is following, read those follows. Every follow gives you information. Use that info. Fish following fast, peeling away at the last second, slow down. Add a pause. Kill the bait. Fish following but won't chase past a certain point, change your angle. Fan out your cast. Fish parallel to the cover. Fish following all the way to the bank but not committing. End of retrieve trigger. Pause, twitch, sweep sideways. Fish slowly ghosting the bait with zero urgency. Finesse down, Ned rig, drop shot, smaller swim bait, weightless worm, wacky rig. Fish following confidently, then suddenly flaring off. Check the details. Try longer casts, lighter line, quieter rod tip. Getting follows, but fish won't come up for the bait. Change your depth. Go heavier, run deeper, get into their zone. Follows on everything, but zero commitment no matter what. Stop trying to react. Start trying to trigger. Deflect off cover, rip it through grass, force a reaction. The guy on the bank in the beginning, the fish were there, he wasn't far off, and neither are you. If the fish are following your lure, you're closer than you think. Most anglers are just one small adjustment away from turning those follows into bites. Give these a try next time you're on the water and you have fish following. If you're still struggling to actually catch fish, or it feels like you're doing everything right and it's just not coming together, watch these two videos next. The first one breaks down the 9 most common mistakes that cost anglers fish every single day. And the second one shows you how to catch fish in pressured water when nothing seems to be working. Subscribe for more. Every week we break down the stuff that actually matters on the water. No hype, no gimmicks.